I was standing in my driveway at 1147 p.m., holding a citation that could cost me my house. The paper was shaking in my hands, not from the October wind, but from pure rage. 24 hours earlier, my home had been a beacon of light and joy, celebrating one of the most sacred festivals in my culture. Now, thanks to HOA President Linda Morrison, I was facing daily fines of $200 that could escalate to a lien on my property. My 7-year-old daughter Priya was watching from the window, her face pressed against the glass, confused why the beautiful lights that honored our ancestors were suddenly illegal. My wife Mira was crying in the kitchen, not because of the money, though $200 a day would bankrupt us, but because for the first time in America, someone had made her feel ashamed of being Hindu. That night, as I looked at that citation under the glow of my Diwali diyas, I made a decision that would change everything. Linda Morrison thought she could bully an immigrant family into hiding their faith. She thought wrong. What she didn't know was that she had just picked a fight with someone whose grandmother had fought for India's independence and whose family didn't back down from bullies, no matter how many HOA bylaws they had memorized. Pause for effect. This is the story of how one woman's hatred ignited a legal firestorm that would expose the dark underbelly of suburban racism and ultimately cost her everything she thought she controlled. Let me take you back to where this all started. 3 years ago, when Mira and I first drove through Willowbrook Estates, we thought we'd found paradise. The tree-lined streets, the pristine sidewalks, the neighbors watering their perfect lawns. It looked like something out of a movie. After years of saving every penny from my software engineering salary, we could finally afford a house in what the realtor called one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in the county. I remember that first day so clearly. Priya, who was only 4 then, ran through our empty new house screaming with joy, her voice echoing off the hardwood floors. "Daddy, is this really ours?" she asked, her dark eyes wide with wonder. Mira and I looked at each other and smiled. We'd made it. The American dream was finally ours. The house itself was everything we'd imagined, a 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch, large windows that let in floods of natural light, and a backyard, perfect for the garden Mira had been planning for years. But more than that, it represented something profound for our family. My parents had immigrated to America in 1985 with nothing but 2 suitcases and a dream that their children would have opportunities they never had. Now, 38 years later, their son owned a piece of America. The neighborhood seemed welcoming at first. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, brought us homemade cookies and spent an hour telling us about the best schools in the area. The young couple across the street, Mike and Sarah, invited us to their 4th of July barbecue. Even the mailman, Jerry, made a point to introduce himself and explain his delivery schedule. For the first few months, life was blissful. Priya started kindergarten at Oakwood Elementary, where she quickly made friends with children from all different backgrounds. Mira found her rhythm working part-time as a graphic designer. While managing our home, I had a short commute to my tech job downtown. We were living the suburban dream. Our first interaction with the HOA was actually positive. When we needed approval to plant Mira's herb garden, the Architectural Review Committee approved it within a week. When we asked about installing a small fence around the backyard for Priya's safety, they were accommodating and professional. I even remember thinking how organized and efficient the whole system was. Linda Morrison was introduced to me as the neighborhood's guardian angel. She'd been HOA president for 7 years, and according to several neighbors, she was the reason property values had increased 23% during her tenure. She was in her mid-50s, always impeccably dressed in pressed slacks and blazers, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair that never seemed to move even in strong wind. During our first meeting, she seemed friendly enough, asking about our backgrounds, welcoming us to the community, explaining the various neighborhood activities and committees. "We're like one big family here," she said with a smile that seemed genuine at the time. "We all look out for each other and maintain the standards that make this Such a special place to live. I had no idea that maintaining standards was code for something much more sinister. Our first 2 Octobers in the house passed without incident. We decorated modestly for Diwali, some string lights along the porch, a few Rangoli designs with colored sand near our entrance, and small oil lamps called diyas arranged around our front walkway. Some neighbors even complimented the decorations. Mrs. Patterson asked Mira about the significance of the lights, and Mira was delighted to explain how Diwali represents the triumph of light over darkness, good over evil. But I started noticing small things that, in hindsight, should have been red flags. Linda would slow down when driving past our house, her eyes scanning our property like she was conducting an inspection. When we hosted a small Diwali celebration for some of our Indian American friends from work, I noticed her peering through her front window, watching our guests arrive and leave. Once I caught her taking photos of our house from the sidewalk with her phone, though. She quickly pretended to be texting when she saw me looking. Still, we felt settled. Priya was thriving in school, making friends and excelling in her classes. Mira had started volunteering at the local community center, teaching art classes to senior citizens. I'd been promoted to senior engineer at my company. We were contributing members of our community, paying our taxes, maintaining our property, and living quietly, which is what made what happened next so shocking and painful. The trouble started on October 15th, 2023, exactly 2 weeks before Diwali. I was debugging code at work when my phone buzzed with a text from Mira. Linda Morrison is at our door with papers. She looks angry. I called home immediately. Mira's voice was shaking. She says we're violating HOA regulations, something about lighting restrictions and cultural displays. She left this notice and said we have 48 hours to remedy the situation or face fines. My stomach dropped. What exactly did she object to? The rangoli I made yesterday for early Diwali preparations, and she says our plan to put up lights will violate the seasonal decoration timeline and aesthetic standards. I left work early that day, something I'd never done before. When I got home, I found Mira in our living room, holding a formal HOA violation notice. The document was 3 pages long, typed in official-looking fonts with the Willowbrook Estates letterhead, but it was the language that made my blood boil. The notice cited violation of Section 12.3, displays of non-traditional seasonal decorations that may diminish property values or create visual disturbance. It specifically mentioned our sand art on walkway and excessive planned lighting, displays for non-Christmas purposes. Non-Christmas purposes. Let that sink in. I read the document 3 times, each reading making me angrier. There was nothing in our original HOA bylaws about religious restrictions. When we'd decorated the previous 2 years, there had been no complaints. The only thing that had changed was the scale of our celebration. This year, we'd planned something special because my parents were flying in from California to spend Diwali with us for the first time since we'd moved to Texas. That evening, I called Linda Morrison directly. The conversation was civil but chilling. Mr. Patel, I'm sure you understand that we have standards to maintain in this neighborhood, she said in a voice that was warm on the surface, but ice cold underneath. Mrs. Morrison, we've celebrated Diwali here for 2 years without any issues. Our decorations are temporary, tasteful, and no different from Christmas displays. Well, that's the problem, isn't it? They're not Christmas displays. This is a Christian community, Mr. Patel. We celebrate Christmas here. We don't celebrate whatever it is you people do. You people. The words hit me like a physical blow. Diwali is a religious festival, Mrs. Morrison. We have the same right to celebrate our faith as Christians do. Not if it violates community standards. I've been getting complaints from neighbors. Which neighbors? There was a long pause. I'm not obligated to reveal that information. You have 48 hours to comply, or the fines begin. She hung up. I spent that night researching HOA law, reading through our community bylaws, and looking up religious discrimination cases. What I found was disturbing. While our HOA couldn't explicitly ban religious practices, they could hide behind aesthetic standards and community guidelines to achieve the same result. But I also found something encouraging: the Fair Housing Act and several Supreme Court cases that protected religious expression in residential communities. The next morning, I decided to test Linda's claim about neighbor complaints. I walked around our block, knocking on doors and talking to the people we'd lived next to for 3 years. Mrs. Patterson was mortified. Complaints? I love your Diwali lights. They're beautiful. I told my sister about them last year. She wants to come see them this time. Mike and Sarah from across the street were equally confused. We're looking forward to your celebration, Sarah said. Mike was going to ask if we could bring the kids over to learn about Diwali. House after house, the story was the same. No one had complained. Several neighbors were actually excited about our decorations. By the time I'd spoken to 15 households, I realized Linda Morrison had lied about the complaints. That afternoon, I received another visit from Linda, this time accompanied by 2 other HOA board members, Robert Chun, the treasurer, and Patricia Williams, the secretary. They looked uncomfortable, like they'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Patel, Linda began, since you haven't removed the sand display from your walkway, the violation period has officially begun. You now owe the community association $200. Each day you remain in violation, that amount will double. Double. I couldn't hide my shock. The original notice said $200 per day, not doubling amounts. She smiled that cold smile again. I've called an emergency board meeting. We've voted to amend the fine structure for repeat and willful violations. The community has standards, Mr. Patel. Robertson shifted uncomfortably. Linda, maybe we should. The vote was unanimous. She cut him off sharply. But I noticed Patricia Williams wouldn't make eye contact with me, and Robert looked like he might be sick. That evening, as Mira and I put Priya to bed, our daughter asked a question. That broke my heart. Daddy, why doesn't the mean lady like our lights? Are we bad people? I sat on her bed, looking at this beautiful little girl who'd done nothing wrong, except be born to parents who lit candles and drew patterns with colored sand to celebrate their faith. No, beta, I said, using the Hindi word for daughter. We're not bad people. Sometimes adults forget that everyone deserves to be treated with kindness, no matter what they believe or where they come from. Will we still have Diwali when Nanny and Nana come? She asked, referring to my parents. Looking into her hopeful eyes, I made a promise that would change everything. Yes, beta. We will have the most beautiful Diwali this neighborhood has ever seen. The next day, I received a call that shocked me. Patricia Williams asked if she could meet me privately at a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, she looked nervous and kept glancing around like she was afraid of being seen. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. The vote wasn't unanimous. Robert and I voted against the fine increase. Linda, she's been planning this for weeks. She's been calling it Operation Restore Standards in private board meetings. My blood ran cold. She planned this. She's been researching your family, Mr. Patel. She knows when your parents are visiting. She knows you ordered extra decorations online. She even knows you took time off work for the celebration. That's stalking behavior. Patricia nodded grimly. There's more. She's been trying to build a case to force you out of the neighborhood. She calls it maintaining demographic consistency. Robert and I are horrified, but she has allies on the board, and frankly, we're scared of her. Scared how? Linda Morrison has destroyed people before. 3 years ago, she went after the Johnson family because their teenage son played music too loud. By the time she was done with them, they'd racked up $15,000 in fines and legal fees. They had to sell their house. I felt like I was falling into a pit. Why are you telling me this? Patricia looked at me with tears in her eyes. Because I came to America from El Salvador when I was 12. I know what it's like to have someone make you feel like you don't belong. And because what she's doing isn't just wrong, it's illegal. That word, illegal, sparked something in me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. Over the next week, the harassment escalated dramatically. Linda began driving past our house multiple times per day, sometimes stopping to take photos. She sent certified letters demanding immediate compliance with community aesthetic standards. She even called my workplace, claiming I was creating neighborhood disturbances that were affecting property values. But the final straw came on October 28th, 3 days before Diwali. My parents had arrived from California, excited to spend the festival with their granddaughter. My father, at 71, had spent weeks making traditional wooden Diwali decorations in his garage workshop. My mother had packed homemade sweets in her collection of brass diyas that had been in our family for generations. We spent the afternoon decorating our house with love and care. Priya helped her grandmother arrange the oil lamps, while my father hung strings of warm white lights along our porch and walkway. Mira created an elaborate Rangoli design at our entrance using colored sand and patterns that represented prosperity and welcome. It was beautiful. It was joyful. It was an expression of faith and family that had been practiced for thousands of years. At 6:30 p.m., as we were lighting the first diyas and saying our prayers, Linda Morrison appeared at our front door with what looked like a small army. 2 other board members, a man with a clipboard who appeared to be some sort of inspector, and someone with a camera. Mr. Patel, you're now in violation of 17 separate HOA regulations, she announced loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. This display is excessive, inappropriate, and in direct defiance of community standards. My father, who had faced down British colonial officers in his youth, stepped forward. His English was accented but clear. Madam, we are celebrating the victory of light over darkness. We are not harming anyone. Linda's response still haunts me. Sir, you're not in India anymore. You're in a civilized American neighborhood with rules and standards. If you can't respect that, perhaps you should find somewhere more suitable. The word civilized hit my family like a physical blow. My mother, who rarely spoke English in public, turned away with tears in her eyes. Priya hid behind my legs, scared and confused. That's when something inside me snapped. I spent that night in my home office, surrounded by legal documents, HOA bylaws, and federal discrimination law. My family was asleep, emotionally exhausted from the confrontation, but I was wide awake, fueled by a righteous anger I'd never experienced before. By 3 a.m., I had a plan. The first thing I did was call my cousin Rajesh in Chicago. He was a civil rights attorney who specialized in religious discrimination cases. I woke him up, but after I explained the situation, he was as angry as I was. This is textbook religious discrimination, he said, his voice grim. The Fair Housing Act is very clear about this. They can't use aesthetic standards as a pretext to suppress religious expression. Can you help us? I can do better than that. I'm going to connect you with Sarah Chun, no relation to your neighbor Robert. She's one of the best civil rights attorneys in Texas, and she's won several cases just like this one. At 8 a.m. sharp, I called Sarah Chun's office. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in her conference room, explaining our situation while she took notes. Sarah was exactly what I needed, brilliant, tough, and outraged by what she was hearing. Mr. Patel, what's happening to your family is not just wrong, it's federally illegal. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in housing based on religion, and HOAs are absolutely covered by this law. What are our options? We have several routes. First, we can file a complaint with HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Second, we can file a federal lawsuit under the Fair Housing Act. Third, we can go after them under Texas state law, which has additional protections for religious expression. What do you recommend? Sarah smiled for the first time during our meeting. All three. But first, we're going to do something that's going to make Linda Morrison very uncomfortable. We're going to gather evidence. Over the next 2 days, while maintaining our Diwali celebration despite the daily fines that were now reaching $800 total, Sarah's team worked with military precision. They interviewed neighbors, requested all HOA meeting minutes from the past 3 years, and subpoenaed Linda Morrison's personal communications related to our case. What they found was even worse than I'd imagined. Linda Morrison had indeed been planning Operation Restore Standards for months. Her private emails, which we obtained through legal discovery, revealed a pattern of racist behavior that was both shocking and stupid. She had written to other board members about preserving the character of our community and preventing the neighborhood from becoming too diverse. In one email to her sister, she had written, "These people moved in 3 years ago and at first kept their weirdness to themselves. But now they're getting bold, inviting more of their kind over and doing their strange rituals right out in the open. Property values will tank if this continues." In another message to a friend, she had said, "I've been researching HOA law for months. There are ways to get rid of undesirable residents without explicitly mentioning race or religion. You just have to be smart about it." But the smoking gun came in an email to Robert Chin that was sent just hours before their first visit to our house. "It's time to send a message that this is a Christian neighborhood with American values. If they want to do their pagan rituals, they can move somewhere more appropriate." Sarah was practically glowing when she showed me these emails. "Mr. Patel," she handed us everything we need to destroy her legally. "This isn't just discrimination. It's a conspiracy to violate your civil rights." What's our next step? We go nuclear. On November 2nd, 3 days after Diwali, Sarah filed a comprehensive lawsuit in federal district court. The defendants included Linda Morrison personally, the HOA board, and the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association as an entity. The claims included violation of the Fair Housing Act, religious discrimination, civil rights conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, violation of Texas religious freedom laws. But Sarah had one more surprise. She had also filed complaints with the FBI Civil Rights Division and the Texas Attorney General's Office for potential criminal civil rights violations. The same day we filed the lawsuit, Sarah held a press conference on the steps of the federal courthouse. Local news crews were there, and the story went viral on social media within hours. Standing behind a podium with my wife, daughter, and parents beside me, I told our story to the world. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking with emotion. My family came to America seeking the same thing every family wants: the chance to live freely, worship peacefully, and raise our children in safety. I said to the cameras, "For 3 years, we thought we had found that in Willowbrook Estates. We were wrong." I talked about Priya's confusion and fear, about my mother's tears, about my father's dignity in the face of racism. I talked about the beauty of Diwali and what it means to Hindu families around the world. "This case isn't just about our family," I concluded. "It's about whether America's promise of religious freedom applies to everyone, or just to those whose faith looks familiar to the majority." By that evening, our story was trending on Twitter. Hashtag Diwali Lights became a rallying cry for religious freedom advocates across the country. Hindu Americans, Muslim Americans, Jewish Americans, and people of all faiths shared their own stories of discrimination and support for our family. But Linda Morrison wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, I woke up to find my car tire slashed and a note on my windshield: "Go back where you came from or it gets worse." That's when I knew we were dealing with something more dangerous than just a power-hungry HOA president. This was hate, pure and simple. I called the police and FBI immediately. The note was turned over as evidence, and agents opened a federal hate crime investigation. Sarah was furious, but not surprised. This is what desperate people do when they realize they're about to lose everything, she told me. It's also the best thing that could have happened to our case. The legal battle that followed was intense, public, and ultimately devastating for Linda Morrison and her allies. Our federal lawsuit moved quickly through the courts. Federal judges don't like civil rights violations, and they especially don't like defendants who create more evidence of their guilt while litigation is pending. Linda Morrison's legal team, expensive attorneys paid for by the HOA's insurance company, tried every defense in the book. They claimed the decorations were genuinely excessive. They argued that HOA aesthetic standards weren't discriminatory. They even tried to claim that Diwali displays were commercial rather than religious in nature. Every defense crumbled under scrutiny. Sarah brought in expert witnesses who testified about the religious significance of Diwali celebrations. She presented evidence that Christmas decorations in the neighborhood were often far more elaborate than our modest display of lights and oil lamps. She showed the court photographs of other neighbors' holiday decorations that had never generated complaints or violations. But most damaging of all were Linda Morrison's own words. During her deposition, a sworn statement taken before trial, Linda Morrison made several statements that sealed her fate. "I stand by my position that this community has standards," she said under oath. "When people choose to live in an upscale neighborhood, they accept certain obligations to maintain property values and community character." When Sarah asked her to define community character, Linda's response was stunning. "Traditional American values. Christmas, not whatever that Indian thing is called. Diwali is a Hindu religious festival." Sarah responded calmly. "Are you saying that Hindu religious practices are incompatible with American values?" Linda Morrison paused for a long moment, then said the words that would end her reign of terror. "I'm saying that when in Rome, do as the Romans do." The deposition video, when played in court, was devastating. You could see the federal judge's expression change from professional neutrality to barely contained disgust. But the case took an unexpected turn when Robert Chun and Patricia Williams agreed to testify against Linda Morrison in exchange for being dropped as defendants. Robert's testimony was particularly powerful. He described Linda's private behavior in board meetings, her obsession with our family, and her explicit statements about wanting to preserve demographic consistency in the neighborhood. She called it cultural creep, Robert testified, his voice shaking with emotion. "She said that if we didn't stop it now, the neighborhood would be overrun with those people and property values would collapse." Patricia Williams's testimony focused on Linda's planning and premeditation. She described how Linda had researched legal ways to force minority families out of the neighborhood and how she had specifically targeted our family because our Diwali celebration was too visible. The trial lasted just 3 days. The evidence was so overwhelming that Linda Morrison's attorneys advised her to settle rather than face a jury verdict. But we weren't interested in settling. This was bigger than money. It was about justice and sending a message that religious discrimination wouldn't be tolerated. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found Linda Morrison and the HOA liable on every single count. The damages were substantial: $150,000 in compensatory damages for our emotional distress and violation of our civil rights, $500,000 in punitive damages designed to punish the defendants and deter future discrimination, and full payment of our attorney fees, which totaled another $200,000. But the court's injunctive relief, the non-monetary remedies, was even more satisfying. The judge ordered the HOA to completely rewrite its governing documents to explicitly protect religious expression. Linda Morrison was permanently banned from serving in any leadership role in the HOA. The HOA was required to send a written apology to our family and every homeowner in the neighborhood, explaining what had happened and reaffirming every resident's right to religious expression. Most importantly, the judge ordered the HOA to pay for Diwali celebration supplies for any Hindu family in the neighborhood for the next 5 years, and to include information about Diwali and other non-Christian religious holidays in all new homeowner orientation materials. When the verdict was read, I looked back at Linda Morrison. She was crying not tears of remorse, but tears of rage and humiliation. She had lost everything: her position, her reputation, and nearly $1 million in damages and fees. But the legal victory was just the beginning of her downfall. The FBI's investigation into the tire-slashing incident led to criminal charges. Security camera footage from a neighbor's house showed Linda Morrison walking to our driveway at 2:30 a.m. with a knife. She was arrested, charged with a federal hate crime, and ultimately sentenced to 6 months in federal prison and 2 years of supervised probation. The Homeowners Association itself was in chaos. Half the board resigned in shame. Property values actually increased once Linda Morrison was gone, and the neighborhood became known as a welcoming, diverse community. Several neighbors approached us to apologize for not speaking up sooner. Mrs. Patterson organized a community-wide Diwali celebration the following year, with over 40 families participating. Mike and Sarah from across the street became close friends, and their children now celebrate both Christmas and Diwali as part of their family traditions. Even Robert Chen, who had been genuinely remorseful about his role in the discrimination, became an advocate for religious freedom in HOA communities across Texas. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came 6 months after the trial, when I received a phone call from Sarah Chen. "You need to see the local newspaper," she said, barely containing her laughter. The headline read, "Former HOA President Linda Morrison evicted from Willowbrook Estates home." It turned out that Linda Morrison had been so focused on attacking our family that she had neglected her own HOA dues and property maintenance. The new board, led by Patricia Williams, had followed the exact same enforcement procedures that Linda had weaponized against us. Linda Morrison lost her house to HOA foreclosure. The bitter irony was perfect. She had been destroyed by the very system she had used to terrorize others. 3 years have passed since the trial that changed our lives. As I write this, it's October 2026, and we're preparing for another Diwali celebration, our 6th in this house, and our 4th since the lawsuit. The transformation in our neighborhood has been remarkable. What started as a battle over religious discrimination has evolved into something much more beautiful. A genuine community where differences are celebrated rather than feared. This year, our Diwali celebration will include families from 7 different countries and 4 different religions. Mrs. Patterson, now 78, has become our unofficial event coordinator. Mike and Sarah's children can explain the meaning of Diwali better than some Hindu kids. The new HOA board voted unanimously to declare Diwali an official neighborhood celebration, joining Christmas, Easter, and 4th of July as community-sponsored events. Priya, now 10 years old, has grown up knowing that her faith and culture are valued and respected. She's confident, proud of her heritage, and unafraid to share it with others. Sometimes I wonder if she fully understands the battle we fought for her right to celebrate who she is. But then I see her teaching her friends to make Rangoli patterns, or explaining to her classmates why Diwali is called the Festival of Lights, and I know she gets it. She knows she belongs here. Mira has become a leader in the community, serving on the new Diversity and Inclusion Committee that the HOA established as part of our settlement agreement. She teaches cultural awareness workshops and has helped 3 other families navigate HOA disputes involving cultural and religious practices. My parents, who witnessed the ugliest face of American discrimination during their visit, have also seen its redemptive power. They've become regular visitors to Texas, often staying for weeks at a time. My father, once quiet and reserved around our neighbors, now holds court in our backyard during community gatherings, sharing stories of his childhood in India and his journey to America. The legal precedent set by our case has been cited in dozens of similar disputes across the country. Sarah Chun has become a nationally recognized expert on religious freedom in residential communities, and she regularly speaks at law, schools, and civil rights conferences about our case. Linda Morrison served her 6 months in federal prison and has since moved to another state. I've heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she's tried to join 2 different HOA boards in her new community, but word of her history has followed her. Sometimes I wonder if she's learned anything from what happened, or if she still believes she was defending standards and property values. I choose to believe that people can change, but I'm not naive about the reality that Linda Morrison was not an isolated case. Across America, in thousands of neighborhoods and communities, people like her hold positions of power and use them to marginalize families like mine. Our victory was important not just for us, but for every family who has ever been told they don't belong, that their traditions are inappropriate, or that their faith is somehow incompatible with being American. The truth is that America's greatest strength has always been its diversity, not just racial or ethnic diversity, but diversity of thought, belief, tradition, and faith. When we try to create homogeneous communities where everyone looks the same, thinks the same, and celebrates the same holidays, we don't preserve American values, we betray them. Every October, as I string lights along our porch and help Priya arrange dias on our walkway, I'm reminded of why we fought so hard. It wasn't really about the right to hang lights or draw patterns in colored sand. It was about the right to be fully American while remaining fully ourselves. It was about the right to belong. Today, when new families move into Willowbrook Estates, they receive a welcome packet that includes information about our neighborhood's commitment to religious freedom and cultural diversity. The packet tells the story of what happened to our family and how the community came together to ensure it never happens again. But most importantly, it includes this message: no matter where you come from, what you believe, or how you celebrate, you belong here. This is your home, and we will defend your right to make it truly yours. That message, more than any legal victory or financial settlement, represents the real triumph of our story. As I finish writing this account, I can hear Priya practicing her presentation about Diwali for her 4th grade class. Her voice is confident and clear as she explains that Diwali celebrates the triumph of light over darkness, good over evil, knowledge over ignorance. It occurs to me that our legal battle was its own kind of Diwali, a victory of light over the darkness of hatred and discrimination. And just like the festival we celebrate each year, that light continues to shine, illuminating the path for others who face their own battles against prejudice and intolerance. In the end, Linda Morrison was right about one thing. This case was about preserving community standards. She just had no idea what true community standards actually look like. If you're facing discrimination in your own community, remember our story. Remember that you have rights, that there are laws designed to protect you, and that there are people willing to fight alongside you. Most importantly, remember that you belong, exactly as you are, celebrating exactly what you believe, in the country that promised all of us the freedom to do. So, your light matters. Let it shine.